What if the person who hurt you the most wasn't a punishment but a message? What if their betrayal, their distance, or their silence was a mirror held up to the wound inside you that you've been avoiding all your life? Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." So what if the hurt was never the real problem? What if the real question is, why did you need to wake up? You've met someone who shook you to your core, not because they loved you well, but because they didn't. Not because they stayed, but because they left. They didn't just hurt you. They exposed something raw inside of you. Something that had been waiting in the darkness of your unconscious mind, patient and persistent. And no matter how much time passes, a part of you still aches when you think of them. You want to move on, you tell yourself. You've read the self-help books. You've practiced the affirmations. You've tried to choose healing. But this wound, it doesn't feel ordinary. Because it's not. Carl Jung understood something that few people ever talk about. Something that challenges everything we've been taught about relationships, about pain, about why certain people enter our lives. We don't just attract people based on what we want. We attract them based on what we need to become conscious of. The universe doesn't send you people to fulfill your fantasy. It sends you people to finish your unfinished story. And sometimes those people hurt you. Not because they're evil, not because you're cursed, not because you're broken, but because your soul is trying to get your attention. Let's be honest about what really happened. The person who hurt you, they didn't just cause pain. They triggered something much older. Something that lived in your bones before you even knew their name. It felt familiar, didn't it? The way they ignored you, reminded you of being invisible at the dinner table as a child. The way they withheld affection, echoed the parent who made love conditional on your performance. The way you kept trying to prove you were worthy of love was the same desperate dance you'd been doing your whole life. This wasn't about them. This was about something deeper, something unresolved. Something Jung called the shadow. The shadow isn't evil. It's not the dark side of your personality. It's simply the rejected parts of yourself. The wounds you buried to survive. The truths you were too young or too scared to face. The needs you learned to silence. The anger you swallowed. The softness you hardened. The voice you muted. And when someone enters your life and awakens these buried parts, they are not introducing pain. They are revealing the pain that was already there, waiting in the shadows of your psyche. They're the spark that lights the fire, but the fire has always been waiting to burn. Pause here and take a breath. Is this what you've been carrying all along? That familiar ache that feels older than the relationship itself? Let me tell you about Sarah. Not her real name, but her story might feel like yours. Sarah was 29 when she met him. Successful marketing executive, beautiful apartment, a carefully curated Instagram life. She thought she had healed from her childhood. She'd done the therapy, read the books, practiced the gratitude. But when David came into her life, charming, emotionally unavailable, always just out of reach, something ancient in her woke up. She found herself checking her phone obsessively, analyzing his every word, staying up late wondering what she'd done wrong, why she wasn't enough. Her friend said, "Just leave him. He's not treating you right." But Sarah couldn't, because David wasn't just David. He was every teacher who overlooked her raised hand, every friend who chose someone else, every moment she'd felt invisible, unworthy, too much and not enough all at once. The pain David caused wasn't new. It was archetypal. It was the pain of every version of herself that had ever been rejected, abandoned, or forgotten. You didn't fall apart because of what they did to you. You fell apart because something inside you had been held together too tightly for too long. Your old defenses, pleasing, performing, overgiving, disappearing, they cracked under the pressure of this familiar wound. You see, we don't just attract lovers. We attract mirrors. And mirrors don't show us what we want to see. They show us what we need to confront. The way they made you feel invisible is exactly how you've been making your inner child feel for years. The way they rejected your love is how you've been rejecting your own softness, your own needs, your own voice. The way they withheld approval mirrors how you withhold compassion from yourself. This is what Jung meant by the transcendent function, the psyche's ability to create meaning from suffering, to transform pain into wisdom. This is the sacred heartbreak Jung alluded to, not the petty kind that comes and goes with circumstances, not the surface kind that time alone can heal, but the kind that strips you of your illusions and leaves only the truth, raw, unfinished, and waiting for your attention. The kind that cracks you open so the light can finally get in. Here's where everything changes. Here's where the story you thought you were living. Victim meets villain. Heart gets broken. Life falls apart. Transforms into something else entirely. The pain they caused you wasn't the destination. It was the initiation. But here's the truth most people miss. The truth that changes everything once you really understand it. You weren't broken by them. You were broken open. And there's a universe of difference between these two states of being. Being broken is destruction. It's an ending. It's defeat. It leaves you smaller, weaker, more afraid. It's what happens when something precious is damaged beyond repair. Being broken open is transformation. It's a beginning disguised as an ending. It's an invitation to finally meet yourself. Not the version you've been performing for others, but the real you who's been waiting patiently beneath all those layers of protection and pretense. You had to feel unloved, to finally ask the question that would change your life. Why do I keep giving love to people who cannot return it? Why do I keep choosing people who are emotionally unavailable? What is it in me that believes this is what I deserve? You had to feel abandoned, to finally face the part of you that always fears being left behind, and to realize that you left yourself behind long ago. You abandoned your own needs, your own voice, your own truth in service of keeping others comfortable. You had to feel invisible to finally see yourself. Not the version of yourself you've been performing, the agreeable one, the understanding one, the one who never asked for too much, but the real you. The one who has opinions and needs and desires. The one who takes up space. The one who deserves to be seen and chosen and loved for who she actually is. This is the heart of shadow work. Jung's most profound gift to psychology and to anyone willing to do the deep work of healing. Shadow work isn't therapy in the traditional sense. It's not about talking through your problems until they make logical sense. It's about diving into the unconscious patterns that run your life, the inherited ways of being that you absorbed before you were old enough to choose them. Shadow work isn't about becoming a different person. It's about becoming a whole person. It's about reclaiming the parts of yourself you exiled in order to survive. Your anger, your boundaries, your voice, your right to take up space, your permission to be imperfect and still be worthy of love. It's about integrating the aspects of yourself that you learned were too much. Your intensity, your sensitivity, your deep capacity for feeling, your need for authentic connection rather than surface-level pleasantries. Shadow work is learning to trace the external pain back to the internal pattern, to stop blaming the messenger and start decoding the message, to understand that your triggers are actually your teachers, pointing you toward the exact places where healing needs to happen. Because if someone can enter your life and destroy your peace, they're showing you where you never had real peace to begin with. You had coping mechanisms. You had control strategies. You had survival techniques that got you through childhood and young adulthood. But peace? True peace comes from knowing who you are and being okay with it. From having boundaries that protect your energy. From choosing relationships that add to your life rather than drain it. If this part hits something in you, keep going. The next few minutes might feel like looking in a mirror for the first time in years, but that's exactly what your soul has been asking for. Let me tell you about Marcus, another story that might sound familiar, even though the details are different. Marcus was the guy who seemed to have it all figured out. 32, successful architect who designed homes for the wealthy. The friend everyone came to for advice because he always had the right answer. He prided himself on being logical, rational, above the drama of emotions that seemed to consume everyone else. Marcus had learned early that feelings were dangerous territory. His father was a surgeon, brilliant, accomplished, but emotionally distant. Love in Marcus's household was earned through achievement. Affection was reserved for report cards and trophies and accomplishments that could be displayed proudly to others. So Marcus became an expert at performing competence. He was the reliable one, the steady one, the one who never let emotions cloud his judgment. Then he met Elena. Elena was everything Marcus thought he didn't want. Emotional, unpredictable, intense in ways that made him uncomfortable. She cried at movies. She laughed too loudly. She felt everything deeply and wasn't ashamed of it. But she triggered something in him he'd never felt before. A longing so deep it scared him. When she looked at him, really looked at him, he felt seen in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. For 6 months, they danced around each other in the way that people do when they're afraid of what they're feeling. Marcus tried to keep it casual, to maintain control, to analyze the relationship like it was a blueprint he could perfect through careful planning. But Elena saw through his defenses. She called him out when he intellectualized his feelings instead of feeling them. She demanded presence when he wanted to hide behind work. She asked for emotional availability when he wanted to offer logical solutions. And then she left. Not dramatically, not cruelly. She just stopped trying. "I need someone who can meet me where I am," she said. "Not someone who's always trying to fix me or manage me or think his way through loving me." Marcus was devastated in a way that made no sense to his logical mind. He'd only known her 6 months. They weren't even officially together. They hadn't made any promises or commitments. Why did it feel like his world was ending? In therapy, which he approached like a problem to be solved rather than a process to be experienced, he began to understand what had really happened. Elena hadn't just rejected him. She'd revealed a part of him he'd been rejecting his whole life. His capacity for deep feeling, his need for authentic connection, his desire to be loved for who he was, not what he achieved. All the parts of himself he'd buried because they didn't fit the image of the successful, rational man he thought he needed to be. Elena's intensity didn't scare him because it was wrong. It scared him because it was right. It was the mirror of everything he'd buried. His own capacity for depth, for vulnerability, for unguarded love. She didn't break his heart. She broke open the prison he'd built around it. And now, you're at the same crossroad Marcus was. You're waking up, not just to their behavior, but to your own patterns. Your own silence when you should have spoken up. Your own self-abandonment when you should have honored your needs. Your own ways of giving love like a currency to earn belonging rather than sharing it as a natural expression of who you are. You're seeing how you've been living from your wounds instead of from your wholeness. You're understanding that every time you settled for less than you deserved, you were actually rejecting yourself. Every time you made excuses for someone's poor treatment, you were abandoning the part of you that knew better. Every time you tried to earn love instead of simply receiving it, you were telling the universe you believed you weren't worthy of freely given affection. This is individuation, Jung's term for becoming who you truly are, not who you think you should be. Not who your parents wanted you to be, not who society expects you to be, not who your wounds have convinced you that you are. Individuation is the process of integrating all the parts of yourself, the light and the shadow, the strong and the vulnerable, the confident and the scared, into a whole human being who can love and be loved authentically. And now you get to choose differently, not from pain, but from awareness, not from desperation, but from wisdom, not from the wound, but from the healing. Take a moment here. In your journal, write this question. What part of myself did this person help me discover? Don't rush to answer. Don't try to make it positive or grateful or spiritually mature. Just let the question sit with you. Let it work on you the way water works on stone, slowly, patiently, persistently. They were not your punishment. They were your turning point. Before them, you were asleep. Not literally, but psychologically. You were living your life on autopilot, driven by patterns you'd inherited but never examined, wounds you'd adapted to but never healed. You were smiling when you didn't mean it, saying I'm fine when you weren't, functioning when you were empty inside, performing a version of yourself that felt safe but never felt true. You were what Jung called unconscious, not aware of the deeper forces shaping your choices, your relationships, your entire approach to being in the world. You were sleepwalking through your own life, guided by unconscious patterns that kept you small, safe, and fundamentally alone. After them, you cracked. And in that crack, light began to enter. Light in the form of awareness, understanding, clarity about patterns you'd never seen before. You saw the truth that had been hidden in the shadows of your unconscious mind. That the love you were chasing from them was really the love you needed to give yourself. That your standards weren't too high, they were too low, because they allowed you to accept crumbs instead of asking why you believed you didn't deserve the whole meal. You saw the part of you that was always trying to fix broken people, to love them in a wholeness, because deep down, you believed that if you could make someone stay, if you could heal someone who was hurt, if you could prove your worth through your service to others, you were finally worth loving. But you're not here to fix anyone. You're not here to be anyone's therapist, mother, or savior. You're not here to make yourself smaller so others can feel bigger. You are here to finally stop abandoning yourself. You are here to reclaim your voice that you silenced to keep peace, to rebuild the boundaries that you tore down to let others in, to remember that your worth is not contingent on your usefulness to others. You are here to learn that love is not something you earn through performance. It's something you are worthy of simply by existing. And the person who hurt you, they help you see that. They showed you every place where you were giving your power away. Every moment where you chose their comfort over your truth. Every time you silenced your inner voice to keep the peace. They were the catalyst for your awakening. Right now, wherever you are, put your hand on your heart. Feel it beating. That heartbeat is not dependent on anyone else's approval. It's been keeping you alive this whole time, even when you forgot to love yourself. Even when you forgot that you matter. This is what Jung called the transcendent function in action. Your psyche's remarkable ability to create something new from the tension between opposites. The tension between who you were and who you're becoming. The tension between the pain of the past and the possibility of the future. The tension between your wounds and your wholeness. The tension between the love you've been accepting and the love you actually deserve. Sarah, the marketing executive I told you about earlier, she finally ended things with David. Not in a dramatic confrontation, not with accusations or demands for closure, but in clarity. She realized that she'd been using their relationship to avoid feeling the deeper loneliness that lived inside her. The loneliness of never truly knowing herself, of never being authentic in her connections with others. She started therapy, real therapy, not just crisis management or problem solving, but the deep work of understanding how her past was shaping her present. She began to understand that her need for external validation didn't come from nowhere. It came from never receiving unconditional love as a child. Her parents loved her achievements, her good behavior, her ability to make them proud. But they never just loved her, the messy, imperfect, sometimes difficult human being she actually was. She learned to sit with her emotions instead of analyzing them away. She discovered that her sensitivity, which she'd always seen as weakness, as something that made her too much for other people, was actually her greatest strength. It allowed her to connect deeply, to understand others, to create meaningful relationships. She learned to trust her intuition instead of overriding it with logic, to speak her truth even when her voice shook, to ask for what she needed instead of hoping someone would guess and give it to her. She set boundaries with friends who only called when they needed something. She stopped saying yes to social events that drained her energy. She started choosing people who saw her intensity as depth rather than drama. A year later, she met someone who loved her sensitivity, not despite it. Someone who saw her emotions as a gift, not a burden. Someone who chose her consistently, not just when it was convenient. But here's the thing, and this is crucial. She could only attract that kind of love after she learned to give it to herself. You can't receive what you don't believe you deserve. You can't attract healthy love while operating from wounded patterns. You can't build a life with someone else that's better than the relationship you have with yourself. Marcus, too, began the slow work of integration. He learned that his logical mind wasn't the enemy of his heart. It was meant to be its partner, not its ruler. He started painting again, something he'd abandoned as impractical when he chose architecture over art. He began to feel his feelings instead of just thinking about them, to experience emotions as information rather than inconvenience. He learned that vulnerability wasn't weakness, it was courage. It was the bridge between who he was and who he was meant to become. It was the door that let people in to love the real him, not just the successful version he'd been presenting to the world. He learned to express his needs instead of pretending he didn't have any, to ask for support instead of always being the one others leaned on, to receive love instead of just giving it. Eventually, he found his way back to Elena, but not as the same man who had lost her, as the man who had found himself. And you're in the middle of that same transformation. You're learning that the person who hurt you wasn't your enemy. They were your teacher. They taught you where you were giving your power away. They showed you where you had work to do. They revealed the places where you needed to grow. They were the mirror that reflected back all the parts of yourself you've been hiding from. Your needs, your worth, your right to be loved for who you are. Write this down. I am grateful for the pain that woke me up. You don't have to feel grateful yet. Gratitude might be years away, and that's okay. Just write it down. Let it plant a seed in your consciousness. Let it begin the slow work of transforming your relationship to your own story. Let me tell you about one more person, Maya. Maya was 28 when she met the man who would change everything. Not because he loved her well, but because he showed her how she'd been abandoning herself her whole life. Jake was charming, successful, and completely self-absorbed. He would make plans with Maya and cancel at the last minute for something more important. He would disappear for days without explanation, then return with just enough attention to keep her hoping. For 8 months, Maya made excuses for him. He's stressed at work, she'd tell her friends. He's not ready for something serious. He's been hurt before. But really, she was making excuses for herself, for why she was accepting so little, for why she kept waiting for someone to choose her who clearly wouldn't. The end came not with drama, but with exhaustion. Maya woke up one morning and realized she was tired. Tired of checking her phone, tired of wondering where she stood, tired of making herself smaller to fit into someone else's limited capacity for love. In that moment of exhaustion, she saw the pattern clearly for the first time. Her mother had been emotionally unavailable, not cruel, but distant. Always busy, always stressed, always focused on everything except really seeing Maya. Maya had learned to be understanding, to not ask for too much, to be grateful for whatever attention she received. And she'd been recreating that dynamic her entire adult life, choosing partners who were emotionally unavailable and then trying to earn their love through her understanding, her patience, her willingness to accept less than she needed. Maya ended things with Jake, but more importantly, she ended things with a version of herself that accepted breadcrumbs and called it love. She started saying no to things that didn't serve her. She stopped explaining herself to people who weren't really listening. She began to trust that her needs mattered, even if no one else was meeting them. 6 months later, she met David. Not the same David who hurt Sarah, but a different man with the same name. This David was present, consistent, emotionally available. He pursued Maya with clarity and intention. And for the first time in her life, Maya didn't have to wonder where she stood. She didn't have to decode mixed signals or make excuses for poor treatment. Because she had learned to value herself, she attracted someone who valued her too. Carl Jung believed that the shadow is not our enemy, it is our path to wholeness, it is the treasure house of everything we need to become who we truly are. And those who hurt us are often the ones who guide us to it. They are the unwitting shamans of our transformation, the unconscious teachers who show us exactly where we need to direct our healing attention, the mirrors that reflect back what we most need to see about ourselves. They enter our lives not to punish us, but to complete us, to help us reclaim the parts of ourselves we lost along the way. So what now? Now, you begin the sacred work of coming home to yourself. Now, you reclaim the pieces of yourself that you gave away, to them, to your parents, to society's expectations, to anyone who made you believe you weren't enough as you are. You reclaim your voice that you silenced to keep peace. You reclaim your boundaries that you dissolved to let others in. You reclaim your standards that you lowered to avoid being alone. You reclaim your right to take up space, to have needs, to ask for what you want. You reclaim your anger at being treated poorly, your sadness at being unseen, your joy that doesn't depend on anyone else's approval. Now you set boundaries not to push people out, but to let yourself in, to create space for the real you to exist and breathe and be loved for who she actually is. Now you stop asking, why did they do this to me? And start asking the question that will change everything. What inside me needed this pain to awaken? Because this pain was never random. It was purposeful. This heartbreak was never punishment. It was initiation. This person was never your enemy. They were your catalyst. The message was simple, though it took a broken heart to hear it. You deserve to be seen, fully seen. Not the version of you that performs for approval, but the real you, messy, complex, beautifully human. You deserve to be chosen, not as a backup plan, not as a project to fix, not as someone who's good enough for now, but as a first choice every single day. You deserve to be held, not just physically, but emotionally, by someone who can handle your depth, your intensity, your truth without trying to change you or fix you or make you smaller. And most importantly, you deserve to be held by yourself, to treat yourself with the tenderness you've been giving to everyone else. If this video has touched something in you, if it's helped you see your pain in a new light, would you share it with someone else who might need to hear this message? Sometimes the most healing thing we can do is let others know they're not alone in their journey. And if you're ready to go deeper into this work, subscribe for more content that helps you understand yourself through the lens of depth psychology. The person who hurt you, they were never meant to stay. They were meant to shake you awake, to crack open the shell you'd built around your heart, the shell that protected you, but also imprisoned you, to show you that you are not broken, you are breaking open, to teach you that love is not something you chase or earn or perform for. Love is something you're worthy of, simply because you exist. And now, armed with this awareness, guided by Jung's wisdom, supported by your own inner knowing, now you rise. Not as the person who got hurt, but as the person who got healed. Not as the victim of someone else's unconsciousness, but as the author of your own awakening. You rise with boundaries that honor your worth. You rise with standards that reflect your value. You rise with a heart that knows the difference between love and obsession, between connection and codependency, between healing and fixing. You rise with the knowledge that your sensitivity is not a flaw to fix, but a gift to treasure. You rise with the understanding that your depth is not too much for the right person. You rise with the clarity that your needs matter, your voice matters, your experience matters. You rise knowing that the universe didn't send you someone to punish you. It sent you someone to free you from the prison of your own unconsciousness, to free you from patterns that no longer serve your highest good, to free you from the belief that you have to earn love through suffering, through service, through making yourself smaller, to free you to finally come home to yourself. This is the gift hidden in the wound. This is the treasure buried in the shadow. This is why the universe sends you someone who hurts you, not to break you, but to birth you into the fullness of who you've always been, waiting beneath all those layers of protection and pretense, into the woman who knows her worth and doesn't accept less, into the person who can love deeply without losing herself, into the being who understands that her pain was never punishment. It was preparation. Preparation for the love she was always meant to receive. Preparation for the life she was always meant to live. Preparation for the person she was always meant to become. Welcome home.